This is experience number 7 in a new experience in the art of living. This experience will teach you the glory of role relationship. This will be of great influence in your home, your business, and every area of your life. Listen once again to Professor Howard Watrous.
No man is an island. No man stands alone. Each man's joy is a joy to me. Each man's grief is my own. We need one another, so I will defend each man as my brother, each man as my friend. I saw the people gather. I heard the music start. The song that they were singing is still ringing in my heart. No man is an island. No man stands alone. Each man's joy is a joy to me. Each man's grief is my own. We're not separated from each other. Even though we would like to be at times, we're so interwoven in our society with each other that we need each other. Now there's going to be one basic reason why you need somebody. I want to ask you just a simple question, and in this question I will have defined the problems of the whole world. You do not want something after you have it. You want something that you do not have. This means tonight in your world are things that you do not have that you want. The things that you want are in somebody else's world, and we call this ownership. Now, what am I going to do? I desperately want this thing and somebody else has it. He owns it. I want to give you 4 methods tonight that the world is using to solve this problem. Are you getting to feel the problem? The more I think about it, the more I know I really want it. And the more I look at it, the more I see you really got rights to it. In other words, you really own it. I'll tell you the first method, which is used far more than you realize, which everyone here tonight has used today already. That'll show you how prevalent it is. I can illustrate it with my little boy. The other day I decided that he should not watch television for 1 week. This was to refresh his memory, to help him a little. Immediately he smiled. He was so happy and thrilled over what I had done. And he made this simple statement: "That's wonderful, because I didn't want to watch it anyway." Now, had he solved the problem? All right, the first method to solve the problem is just to decide that I really didn't want it after all. Now, doesn't that seem harmless? If it wasn't for my little boy, it cost him a whipping. Right on the spot. In other words, was he trying a form of adjustment that would ruin him? All right, we call his method psychological withdrawal. Now, I know he wasn't psychologically withdrawn, he was conniving. But will that lead to psychological withdrawal? Yes, it will. Let me go through the actual column of the whole structure of what happens to you as a human being when you do nothing but stop wanting. Number 1, your mental health. It diminishes. Every time you squelch a desire, you are less healthy mentally. So we say it induces mental illness. The basis for it will be a kind of self-indulgence. Self-pity is where it actually begins. The effect on you as an individual, it will make you become a vegetable. Now, you say, well, that's okay because it doesn't have any effect on anybody else. Would you like to know what percentage of your taxes go to feed these vegetables? Is it a burden on society to pay for all this? By the way, we've got some of them in mental institutions over 20 years being fed through the veins. What's the long run result? Death. And the method? Withdrawal. There's such a prevalent method of solving the problem that I wanted to outline it very clearly, that should you ever use this method again. Now, to be mentally healthy, you have to be insatiable in your need structure. totally insatiable. All right, let's move from the stop wanting to the next one, and it's just about as bad. If you were to diagram this on the affectional field diagram, which we studied last week, the stop wanting is on the indifference line at the very bottom of the affectional field. The next one is from indifference to the rational line. We call this contest. It's really conflict. You'll go into conflict pretty soon. And what this basically means is I see what I want, and I see that you own it, but I take it anyway. I mean, after all, I've got to have it. It's necessary for my happiness. I'm sorry that you happen to be the one that owns it. That's tough. I'm going after it, and I'm going to have it for my own. Now, I have listed here 20 different categories of methods that we use to go into contest with somebody to take something away from them. Now, we don't want to spend too much time on this, but we want to go over it sufficiently enough so you can know what a contest is when you see it. In other words, so you'll be aware of a contest tomorrow. You'll be in 100 of them tomorrow before you're through. I want you to have the full feeling that I am now in a contest, and I want you to feel the effects of the contest on your body. All right, what does the contest do to your need structure? Back to the car dealer. I could have had a new car a lot sooner, couldn't I? But because of contest, did I want to go back? All right, we say then that under contest, the need structure diminishes. Now, the basis for a contest, well, you could say self-defense. This is true a lot of times. In other words, I've been attacked. I happen to have something that you want, and you attack me. Well, then we say self-defense. Another basis just happens to be the weapons that are available. In other words, I have something at my hand, and it happens to be a gun, and you happen to be breaking into my house. So I use what is available for the fight. But let's go to a little more sophisticated way. Socially defined combat areas have been set up by our society. And we'll go into these in just a moment. And then finally, a supposed power image. In other words, I begin to think, after I've taken a lot of things from a lot of people, I'm tough. I mean, I get the idea that I can push my weight around. All right? Two things can happen to me in a contest. Number one, I can win. Number two, I could lose. If I win guilt. In other words, I feel bad because I won. Secondly, I could feel like I was lucky. Now, every one of us know there's only so much luck to go around. What happens when I win? I've used up my portion of luck, then do I feel uncertain? Let's go to our poker game. The man who wins gets an uneasy feeling because he feels like every time I win, I'm using more of my luck up. The man who has not won yet knows what's bound to happen. His is still there, still waiting to be tapped. This is why the guy that wins the door prize, how does he feel the next time he comes to the meeting? Well, he knows one thing for sure, he's not winning this day. You see then, which is it better for you psychologically, to lose or win the door prize? Believe it or not, to lose. Because if you lose, you still feel good. Because you still got your luck there. All right? I could develop some type of a false power image, could I not? In other words, I won, which would make me think I'm powerful. By the way, that only does one thing to me. It makes me choose a tougher partner, doesn't it? And it makes me go into a larger battle, which means I could really end up in a disaster. Now, the other side of the coin, what if I lose? Well, I could develop an inferiority complex. Or I could feel robbed, or I could feel that I've been taken advantage of. I could be bitter. Now, let's look at the long-run results. Well, eventually, contest always ends in death. What kind of death? Well, probably the typical pattern of death in the United States is a heart attack. Heart attacks are the result of open warfare in our society. Before I die, I'll become very suspicious. I'll have feelings that I want to get even. Have you ever wanted to get even with somebody? Some business? This feeling destroys you. Ill will is almost always there whenever I lose, and ill will destroys me. Now, it would seem like from our discussion of contest, you shouldn't enter a contest, wouldn't it? It's derogatory every way we look at it. All right, now I want to give you 20 basic categories that we as Americans use every day that end up with these kind of results. And many of these contests we're not aware of because we've been trained so thoroughly as little children to fight that we end up as adults fighting without realizing we're fighting until we get an ulcer. The doctor says, take it easy. Go on a vacation. In other words, he's taking you off the front lines, is he not? Send you to some lake for a while to rest. In other words, you have fought too much and too hard. All right, I want to go through the 20, and I want to start with the worst and go to the most acceptable. The worst kind of contest that we have in our society today is murder. Does this normally allow me to have what I want? Obviously, if you owned it and you're no longer alive, what happened to your ownership? Well, we got rid of it. And supposedly the guy who got rid of you is going to be the new owner. And this is basically the philosophy of murder. If a man has a beautiful wife, you kill him, she's yours. And we've been living this kind of a belief for centuries in this world. Next one that's not quite as bad, but almost, is kidnapping. In other words, you've got some money and I want it, all I got to do is kidnap your son. Hold him for ransom. The next one, that's almost as bad as kidnapping, is isolation. Here's a woman who has an illegitimate baby, 2 weeks old. Now, does she have a problem? She wants to get rid of it. Now, we say then she is in contest with that baby trying to solve a problem. So she goes down to the Greyhound bus station, rents a locker, and puts the baby in. Has she entered a contest with the child? Yes. Has she won? Yes, I think she's won. Does she suffer guilt? Yes. I want you to follow the whole thing all the way through. The baby cries, somebody hears it, the baby gets a new home. The baby, does he feel he's been taken advantage of? He grows up, finds out that his real mother left him. All right, the next one is psychological disintegration. This has been used a few times in our society by men who do not want to pay for the lawyers for divorce proceedings. In other words, if she's committed, do you have to have a divorce? In some states, I think it's 7 years and you're free. Does this allow the man to have what he wanted, though? His freedom and his money. All right, the next one is an outcast. Where we solve the problem, we don't want him around, so he's not part of us anymore. Now, the 5 that I have just given you, we call dissolving or discontinuing. They're socially unacceptable. Therefore, we look down on them as taboo. All right, the next 5 are also socially unacceptable, but they are on a continuing basis. The worst of these 5 is war. By the way, I'm talking about a 20-year feud between families. I know of a particular brother right now. He's 76 and he has not spoken to his other brother for 20 years, and the dispute is afoot on the property line. These are 240-acre ranches. They buried their father and never spoke at their funeral to each other. Can you imagine doing this over a foot? This is war. This is family warfare. The next one is physical attack. This can be assault. And you read about this in the papers. Another form of physical attack is rape. Rape simply is what? She has something he wants. Does she want to give it to him? No, he takes it anyway. In other words, he's assuming that she's not there, is he not? All forms of contest are actually a pretense that the person who owns whatever I want, that they don't exist. The next one is dueling. It's interesting that that used to be socially acceptable. And by the way, when dueling was socially acceptable, divorce wasn't. So we have a new advanced society now. Divorce is acceptable and dueling is not. But can you see they both saw the same purpose? If divorce is wrong and dueling is correct, can I kill him? Then do we have to have a divorce? All right, now when I outlaw dueling, what do I have to do with divorce? Make it socially acceptable. The next one is stealing. And by the way, this illustrates the point. When I steal something, do I recognize you as ownership? No, stealing is pretending you're not even around, that you don't even own it. And stealing is actually pretending that what I want is free, is it not? Right? The final one on socially unacceptable is threatening. You say, well, really, is that socially unacceptable? It is, because it's illegal. You're not allowed to use the government mails for purposes of threats. We have another group of 10 that to me are just as devastating as the 10 I've just given you, but they're socially acceptable. The next 10 means that society says it's all right. Now I want to go through the worst again up to the least desirable. All right, the worst one of the socially acceptable is divorce. Does divorce solve a problem? Certain people want certain things, and certain people are in their way, and divorce gets rid of them. By the way, did you know divorce normally means the termination of a person? Because after you divorce him, do you want to live in the same town? Do you want to see him again? In other words, can you say there's friendship after divorce? Normally not. All right, the next one is discharge or termination. This is what we normally have in business or the military. The next one is suspension. This is an institution. If they don't want you around anymore, or they want you away for a period of time as punishment, again, are they trying to get what they want? Therefore, they suspend you to solve the problem. The next one is separation. And we have even legal separation, which proves that society is in favor of separation. Now, these four, so far, are all under the column of dissolving or discontinuing. And the final one of dissolving is called non-acceptance. This is indifference. You ever heard of a wife who wouldn't speak to her husband? She's pretending that he was never born. Isn't this what she's doing? In other words, it's real childish, but it's an attempt to solve her problem by pretending you're not there anymore. Therefore, I can have what I want and you're not in my way. All right, now that's 15 of them. Let's go to the final 5, and probably everyone here tonight, you really don't deal too much in the first 15. But I would say that the majority of your behavior in the past will be in the next 5. We'll go from the least desirable to the one that actually people practice most of the time and even call good, but still being in the contest will be undesirable. All right, the first one is deprivation. You can call this withholding, acquisition, gambling. It's basically a socially acceptable form of stealing. In other words, we had stealing in our column of socially unacceptable. And this is interesting to me. When something is socially unacceptable, we devise a sophisticated method of the same thing, which is socially acceptable. So let me define how you can steal with society's blessings. And the words are deprivation, withhold, gambling, and acquisition. We'll go through them. In fact, let's use this one as an illustration tonight to show you how well you've been trained by your parents to fight. We'll go through it step by step. A little baby's born. And the mother has been afraid of a little tiny spot on top of its head called a soft spot. And we made a fuss over this. In other words, this is a special place. So finally the baby realizes, I belong to my mother and my father, but for this maneuver of contest, I'm going to steal myself from them. And then I'm going to kill myself. Now, he takes the most valuable part of his body, which is the soft spot, and bangs it on the wall. Or on the floor. I've never figured out yet why they choose the wall or they choose the floor. And then what does the mother do? Oh no, she says, that's precious. Then does she give him what he wanted? All right, has that child engaged in contest with that mother and won? That's the first battle. By the way, you want to try an interesting experiment. The next time you have a baby, pretend that the soft spot's on its foot. You just make a fuss over it, its foot. What do you suppose it'll do? It'll steal the foot and bang the foot on the floor. And then maybe that'll help you win the contest. Then you can laugh. Well, kick the wall. But by the way, if it doesn't win that fight, it has another method. It can steal itself, and again it will kill itself, only this time it'll hold its breath. Now, when a child holds its breath, what do you suppose the typical mother does? Grants whatever the child wants. It scares her half to death. All right, now I'll tell you what I would do if I were you and my child decides he's going to fight with me, and he's entered into a contest and he's holding his breath. I would just pretend I didn't see it. I mean, just be so busy about something else and walk around, and it will be sincere. There's no question about that, because it'll go unconscious then. Now, make sure when it comes to, you act like it hasn't been out. Now, this will be hard because its face will be purple. And it's quite an experience, by the way. You ought to try it yourself sometime to feel the sensations. You feel like you're losing yourself just before you go unconscious. Now, this will give you some idea what this poor child's been through. Will you try it again? Say, that was the wrong thing to do. There must be an easier way for me to get what I want in this world. But now, the average parent, would they lose that fight? Now, every time I lose a fight, what have I taught the child? Contest is the way of life. In other words, contest is how you go after what you want. Right now, pretty soon the child decides, my mother cannot stand noise. She doesn't like crying. So they decide they cry. And then that makes you do whatever you're supposed to do. So you go ahead and lose the next fight. Well, she thinks she only lost when they were teenagers. When did she start losing the war? The minute they were born. All right, let's say that the baby decides it's a lot of work to cry. I mean, it is. You got to produce tears, you got to do the whole routine. So babies have developed a beautiful thing now. It's a loud, shrill type of a squeal. Now, how does that baby know what pitch to put this thing at? I'll tell you, if you ask the mother that has one, she'll tell you the pitch is the worst pitch on earth because it goes right through her. In other words, has a baby tried different pitches? It's experimented to find the one that goes right to the very core of her spine till she can't stand it. Now notice how it works. The minute the mother starts to move to do what the baby wants, what's the baby do with the squeal? The minute the mother stops, the squeal comes back. In other words, is this just like a trainer with elephants? A little tiny man making a great big elephant do things. Here's a little tiny baby in the crib making that mother jump. Now finally the baby says, this squealing is too much work. By the way, it's won all the way, hasn't it? But it's becoming more sophisticated in the attack. Now it says, I have come to the conclusion that she wants me to be happy. So now what does the baby have to do? A simple pout. And if this is practiced and the baby becomes proficient at it, will it work? What's wrong with our poor baby now? What does she want to make her happy? Maybe it's a new toy. So then they go down and they try experimenting. Does the baby love this? They don't even know what's wrong now, but they're really worried and they're jumping all over the place. They haven't satisfied what I started out with this warfare for, but after all, they're giving me all these other prizes. I'll just wait and see how far it'll go. Right now, after this child has been schooled 6 years, it's time to go to grade school. And he learns there's a little game, they shoot marbles. So he gets in, he shoots, and he wins. And pretty soon he's won all the marbles. Now, what happens when you win in gambling? We mentioned already. You become insecure, don't you, because you've used up all your luck. So he realizes, could I win again? No, he says, I couldn't win again. So then he makes a little tiny circle that he shoots from, and a great big circle that the other kids shoot from. And if any of them should be lucky enough to hit a marble, what will he do with their circle? Move it back. I saw some boys the other day, he had the bigger circle clear back in the grass. Poor kids, they had to shoot through the grass trying to get their marbles in. Now, what if those other children decide they don't like these new rules? He won't change the rules. Now, here's an expression that's become very famous. If you don't like my rules, I will take my marbles and go home. Now, who taught him to be such a conniver? Mother and father. In other words, he learned to fight at home. Now he's out there, and all the way through grade school does he fight. Sometimes physically, but if he can keep from fighting physically, always remember, man's very skillful. Physically is what he does last. Actual physical assault. Will he use more skillful, more subtle ways to fight that will not cause as much risk or damage to his own person? So the boy picks up his marbles and goes home. What's the rest of the kids think of this? Ill will. I'm not going to play marbles with him anymore. And they got to go home and connive again with their parents to get more money, to buy more marbles. Are we getting a vicious circle? Let's go when they get a little older. Here's a 16-year-old girl. And anything she's ever wanted, her mother and father have just jumped when she cried or when she pouted. And she's grown up to be quite a neurotic. So she's dating. And by the way, a lot of men have complained to me about neurotics that they've been hooked up to for the rest of their life. And I've asked several of them, well, you were tested, did you not know? I said, what do you mean tested? I said, well, in courtship, she tested you to find out if you would be acceptable. So I've asked them, did she cry and pout during courtship? Every one of them have told me, yes. Here's the reason. If you, for 16 years, had practiced the method to obtain what you wanted, and you were getting ready to change homes, what would be the most important criteria in the new home? It better work. In other words, if I moved into a new home and I don't have any way to obtain what I want, I'm going to be lost. So during courtship, she cries, and what if the guy says, this is a bunch of nonsense, I'll take you home until you feel better. She comes home, she says, Mom, I don't really know why, but I got a feeling that he's not the right boy. She's probably telling the truth that she doesn't know why. But now, let's say she's out with another boy and she cries and he says, oh, you poor thing, what's wrong? I'll do anything for you. Now, she comes home, she says, Mother, I've got the one and only. She moves into that house and doesn't work. She burns the food. Does she worry? Cries. He takes her out to dinner. I mean, she's got him doing anything she wants. All right, now let's assume that two beautiful secretaries propositioned him that day. He's strong. He resisted. He comes home because he knows his wife's waiting. But now, really, sex is whose here? Does he own her? All right, he should have his affair, should he not? But she happens to want a fur coat. So she does what? She steals what was his, then she withholds it from him until he gives her a fur coat. Well, sure enough, the guy needs a loving, so she gets her fur coat. You say, well, does she come around and say so? No, but she doesn't plain enough till he gets the message. She understands, and he understands. You don't have to use words. You have to come out and say, fur coat or no. Although in some counseling situations I've heard that they've been that brutal and that blunt. But even though she is taken out to dinner, and even though she gets the fur coat, what's building up inside of him? Resentment, ill will. In other words, he knows I have been used. Will this accumulate? Normally it ends in divorce. And again, she picks the next husband on the same basis.